As we look at 12.6, adding and subtracting rational expressions with unlike denominators, the big change of today versus our previous lesson is our denominators today are not going to be the same. So our first step is always going to be to find the lowest common denominator between the denominators that we have. To do this, we're going to have to compare them and determine what is the lowest common denominator. Now, many of you are very familiar with doing this with just numbers, but when we throw variables in there, it might be a little bit of a difference, but even so, it's not that difficult. So first we're going to look at 7 and 3, are our first two denominators. Between 7 and 3, the smallest number that both of them will go into is 21. In many cases, our lowest common denominator is going to be a multiple, or just the multiplying of these two. Now, between the y to the fourth and the y squared, we need to think the first one has y times y times y times y. The second one just has y times y. So we need to have the largest group that is in both. So y to the fourth is our LCD because it has the most number of y's. Now, once we've determined the LCD, we're going to multiply each fraction by what's missing that would give it the lowest common denominator. So on our first one, 3 times 7 is 21, and we don't need any other y's because we already have y to the fourth. On our second fraction, we need to multiply by both a 7 and 2 more additional y's, so a y squared. And then our denominators each will have common denominators. On here we have 9 over 21y to the fourth, and here we have 14y squared over 21y to the fourth. Now we're in a position like we were yesterday with the homework, and we have common denominators, so we can add these together. I'm going to put the 14y squared first because that is standard form. And there we go, just like that. Let's look at our second one. Between 25x and 100, we need to think, what are the multiples? We don't want to necessarily say 25 times 100, but we can say, oh, both of them can go into 100 as a lowest common denominator. And then there's 1x between the two. So if we have 100x be our LCD, that will give us our problem successfully. So I'm going to put our parentheses here. And we're going to need to say, okay, we're going to change this first of all to a plus, and I'm going to put a minus sign out front, just so the minus is in between the two fractions. And we're going to say 25 times what is 100x? Well, that's times 4x. So if you multiply the bottom by 4x, we're also going to multiply the top by 4x. Over here, we already have a 100. All we need is an x. Now, I need to go back because I just made a mistake. This is actually a 25x on the bottom, which means we don't need to have these two x's here because we already have an x there. So, our numerator becomes 16 over 100x on the left, minus 49x over 100x on the right. Because we have a common denominator of 100x, we can combine our numerators, 16 minus 49x. So, just as a review of these first two, we want to find a common denominator between our denominators, multiply by what's missing. Notice the numerator and the denominator are the same on our multiples, which effectively multiplies everything by 1. Alright, let's look down at 3 and 4. Between 12 and 36, can you think of the common denominator? Stop for a moment and write down what you think would go as the common denominator between 12 and 36. Hopefully you said 36. Now let's focus on our b's. We have b here and b squared there. Between the two b values, b squared, the higher one, is the common denominator. Alright, so what we're going to do is we're going to set this up in such a way that we need to figure what do we need to multiply by as our missing portions. So I'm going to recopy down the problem, except I'm going to put my two missing parentheses, and these are my multipliers for what's missing. 12b times what is 36b squared? What's missing? Well, a 3 is missing, and 1b is missing. On this side, 36b squared, we already have 36b squared, so there's nothing missing. So I'm guessing we're just going to multiply by 1. Let's combine our things together. 3b times 5 is 15b plus 15 all over 36b squared. Now, we haven't had this scenario yet, but I want to look at this and remember what we've done in the previous times. Let's examine and look at each of our 3 coefficients. Can you think of any numbers that go into 15, 15, and 36? Hopefully you're realizing, oh, they're both all divisible by 3. And so let's do that. Let's divide them all by 3. 5b plus 5 over 12b squared. If all the numbers are divisible by the same number, a common divisor, then we can simplify. So we're going to need to look for that very carefully. So we look at our last one. Between 3x and 6, what would our common denominator be? I'll pause for a second and allow you to figure that out. Between 3x and 6, between 3 and 6, it's going to be a 6, and between x and nothing, it's going to be an x. So, our LCD is 6x. So let's take our 2 over 3x, multiply it by what's missing, then we'll take our 1 over 6, multiply that by what's missing, and here I put the multiplier at the back half. That might be easier for some of you. And we can say, okay, 3x times what is 6x? Yes, that's a 2 over 2. 6 times what is 6x? Well, that's an x over x. So let's do our multiplication here. 4 plus x all over 6x. Once again, let's focus on our numbers in front. 4, 1, and 6x. Does anything go into all 3? Not in this case. So 4 plus x over 6x is an answer, or x plus 4 over 6x is probably the preferred answer because that is in standard form in the numerator. Okay? Now, second half of the homework is going to be very short, very straightforward. What I want to do is I want to work through this second half of the homework. When you're finished, check your answers and come up front and record your scores. And when everyone's done with that, then we're going to take a look and answer any questions you have over the practice test. If you finish this before other people, start working on the yellow practice test and going over anything that's in there relating to section 6 that you might not have done yet. And then we'll go over those questions in about 10 to 15 minutes.